So this is an excerpt from my book that I'm working on at the moment that's coming out next year called The Abyssinian Contortionist. And it's the story of my friendship with Sosina Wagayu, who's an Ethiopian-Australian circus performer. And this is a chapter called Hurdy-Gurdy. So this is sort of how it happened. Sosina said to me, "How about it, Dave?" I was walking to the flat Sosina shared with her husband Mel in the Housing Commission high-rises of Carlin, inner North Melbourne, Australia. I'd never been inside these Housing Commission flats before and was a little nervous at the prospect, on guard for drug dealers and muggers. These flats, like their post-war cousins elsewhere, the abandoned children of Le Corbusier, are decrepit now, windswept castles with invisible battlements to keep the poor, the mad, and the newly migrated isolated from the chic bars and cafes springing up all around. I ride my bicycle to work at the university each day through the grounds of the Housing Commission flats. In the morning, I see the Somali mothers in their hijabs walking their kids to the little public school on the edge of the flats, the school that the middle-class families avoid. Opposite the school, at the southern end of the flats, is a church that doles out soup sometimes. The mosque is a much longer walk away in the other direction along Drummond Street. Built by the expatriate Albanian community, its slender minaret towers incongruously above the Victorian terrace houses of Carlton North. Saucy had given me instructions, which building to enter, which lift to take, which floor to get out. The foyer for the lifts was cold and grimy brown. A middle-aged man occupied a bench opposite the twin lift doors, hunched and distant elevators. I thought to myself idly, if the lift doors open and a young man steps in, do I follow? What are the chances he will knife me in the lift against the mirror? I occasionally do have such idle knifing thoughts, imagining how surprised my face would look as the blade slid into me. I rode up to the 11th floor alone and came out onto an open landing. Like a hotel turned inside out, the building's corridors run on its exterior. Heavy mesh had been erected above the concrete railings, as if to say the urge to fly downwards or to push one's fucking wife or fucking neighbour over to a bloody death had too often been too hard to resist. Nothing stirred on the 11th floor. I knocked on the door that bore the number Saucy had given me. Immediately it swung open and she embraced me with her familiar gusto. "Hi Dave, come in." The flat, a small oasis, shimmered in the late afternoon light from the west-facing windows. A large red leather couch set and a flat-screen TV crowded the living room. "Look at our beautiful view," said Saucy. Through the golden haze I could make out the Westgate Bridge and the distant hills of the Uyangs. Saucy made me Ethiopian coffee, strong, black and sweet. I sat at the dining room table and looked at the large framed wedding photos on the wall. Saucy and Mel posed resplendent in their formal outfits like royalty. Mel, she told me, was sleeping in the bedroom. He worked the night shift at a biscuit factory in Kensington, as well as studying for his degree in computer networking and helping with the Footscray community at the African Youth Centre. Saucy poured the boiling water onto the coffee in the traditional ceramic pot, dun-coloured with a narrow open neck that also served as a handle and a separate spout. She tilted the pot on its side towards the spout and left it to brew, balanced on a stand. When she poured the coffee, she took care to keep the pot tilted so that the sediment remained undisturbed at the bottom. "Why do you want to tell your story in a book, I asked. "Why precisely?" "Because people don't see me for who I am. If I say I am Ethiopian, people only think of 1984, the famine, starving children. They're so surprised to look at me. You are a well-fed Ethiopian girl." They ask, "Do you have a house? Do you have pet elephants? Pet tigers?" She looked at me incredulous. "We get asked about kangaroos," I said. She nodded and pointed at the bowl of vegetable stew. "Do you like the sauce? We call that what? Is it too hot for you? Coffee?" She poured more coffee into my cup and munched on a scrap of injera, the ubiquitous Ethiopian bread. She told me that she had a name in mind for the book, Short Black. This refers both to her height and skin and to the cultural significance of coffee in her birthland of Ethiopia, for Ethiopia is coffee's birthland too. Not South America, as I'd vaguely thought. "I have a subtitle for the book too," she said, "Tales of an Abyssinian Girl. It's better to say Abyssinian instead of Ethiopian because they will not think only of 1984. "How about it, Dave?" she said. Usually, I hate being called Dave. Saucy and I first met among trapeze bars and tightwire walkers. We were both working for Circus Oz, a contemporary circus, the sort without animals or sawdust, and something of an institution in Australia. You can search it up, as my son Louis would say. Sosina, having long since ceased to surprise her parents back in Ethiopia, had walked into the job as a performer, straight out of the New Australian National Circus School. I was helping to direct their new show. I directed Circus Oz once before, but unlike Sosina, wasn't really a circus type. My background and training had been in theatre, and personally, I had a positive terror of attempting anything more acrobatic than a forward roll. Sosina came into Circus Oz as a contortionist and juggler, and her act was one of those I was responsible for directing. In practice, this meant I mainly stayed out of the way and made encouraging noises, as she and the aerialist Annie Davey devised a new hybrid contortion and trapeze act. They called it the crane. The lights come up on Sosina rotating on a small disc lit with footlights. She is dressed as if in a 19th century travelling attraction show. The circus musicians stand close by, playing hurdy-gurdy music as she twists her body inside and out. The big top is crowded, hushed. Sosina comes to a rest in some enfolded pose, from which Annie, who has been lowered towards the stage on a trapeze bar, grasps and lifts her into the air as the ropes of the trapeze are hoisted up again. Just like a crane, you see, the mechanical kind, not the bird. In the air above the ring, the two of them twist in each other's arms, with Annie, strong as two women, bearing the weight of Sosina, until the latter settles her body into a new impossible position and is once more deposited on the disc, there to spin slowly, hurdy-gurdy, hurdy-gurdy, shoulders onto ankles, eyes staring out between her thighs. Sosina's gaze, calm and even, catches the audience just as they catch her. This is the act, really. Contortion makes the body strange and freakish, and this is an African body too, in front of a largely white audience, so it is stranger still, tickling distant memories buried deep within the culture. Isn't she a little like a, whisper it, gollywog, with her raggle-taggle hair and floppy limbs? The dolls our mothers played with, the dolls I, David, remember from my Australian childhood in the 60s? Everything had its place in the corner pile of porcelain and cloth and wool. Even little Golly, she could join in too, although she was altogether different and came from somewhere far away in the jungles and the deserts where Mowgli lived, and little Black Sambo too, the dark boy who ran and ran in circles and melted into butter with the tiger chasing him. Or did the yellow tiger melt? They all melted together in the jungles of a child's mind and the glimmer of a starchy hardback. Hurdy-gurdy. Sosina, on her spinning disc among the light bulbs, is the gollywog brought to life. But she looks right back at us, her audience, and says, well, actually, you have no idea who I am. But that's okay, because it's my show now that you're watching. At first glance, there's nothing about Sosina and me that's the same. She's short, I'm tall. She's black, I'm white. She's a woman, I'm a man. She was born in just about the poorest country in the world, I in affluent Australia. She can bounce juggle 8 balls on a block of marble. I can juggle 3 balls in my hands. That's my greatest circus trick, and I'm quite proud of it. It has variations, the basic pattern, the outside in, the upside down, the snazzy one where you throw one of the balls especially high in the air and pause or do a twirl, and the joke pattern in which one hand juggles 2 balls while the other moves the third ball up and down alongside, doing no juggling at all. If you do the joke pattern well, the audience falls for the illusion, even if only for a moment, before they see the trick and before they realise that you are happy for them to see the trick. But I cannot begin to imagine being able to juggle 8 balls, what it must take to master such a skill. Not only the hours of single-minded practice, but the obsession, the yogic focus. Sosina says she loves to train her hands to do things really fast. When she had a job for a few weeks selling popcorn front of house, one of her tasks was to fold the paper cups for the popcorn into shape. She became obsessed with the choreography of the task. She analysed the exact sequence of movements required to fold one paper cup. Once she had it down, she worked on going faster and faster. She would come in early to work and fold a whole stack of cups, far more than she needed to, quicker than anyone else would dream of. She turned the act of folding paper cups into a feat, a meditation. She's told me that Ever since she first came across contortionists, magicians, jugglers, knife throwers, and all the rest at the age of 6, sitting on the floor of her parents' lounge room in Addis Ababa, gazing at the once-a-week German variety show on the only television channel in the land, Sulcina knew that she wanted to master such tricks for herself, no matter how long it took, and to perform them wherever and whenever she could find an audience in all the great and far-off corners of the world. And she has done it. Where does she get that single-minded determination? This, I thought, would be my Not Me book. I'd already written a book about me, about my family, my father, his suicide and how I missed it, being only 6 months old when it occurred, and about nobody afterwards ever mentioning it, or him, and how I had this overwhelming drive to make them all tell me everything they knew about his life and death, no matter how bad it was. And this overwhelming drive, too, to write the story down, have others read it. And yes, I suppose that includes others in all the great and far-off corners of the world. This book would be about Sulcina, the epitome of not me, but it would also feel wrong to pretend I wasn't involved, to pretend that telling, making and sharing stories across cultures isn't complicated. In Circus Oz, they never hide the rigging in their acts. I wondered what kind of book we could make together, what would be its bones and its intestines. Saucy, early on, lent me a couple of recent autobiographies of sub-Saharan African women, stories of extraordinary courage and hardship, female circumcision, war, bloodshed, triumph over circumstance, stories that went inexorably, for better or worse, from A to B. I couldn't get into them. I felt I knew already what they were telling me, just not the details. We turn on the TV, we see current affairs reports of far-off pain and suffering. On the other channel is the tennis. I almost certainly didn't give those books the attention that those women's stories merit. But half the world's problems, maybe more than that, are about getting somebody to pay attention, aren't they? The book-selling industry has a category I've come across in airport bookshops called misery biography. The counterpoint on the adjacent shelf is entertainment biography. But are those really the only two types of life stories we're interested in? I don't think I want to do it quite like that, I said to Saucy. You know, straight like that. Sure, she said. I don't mind. We can do it how we like. Sulcina is an artist. In a circus, it's all about trust. If your partner drops you, you might be dead.